So in this video I want to show you how you can recreate some classic Minimoog patches with Ableton Live's Analog Synth. And this is not going to be some only sound design tutorial, because I want to make it some comparison type video as well, because there's a plugin from Arturia, the MiniV, which emulates specifically some Minimoog, and I picked 3 presets of this plugin because I also have this Arturia collection, and just try to specifically recreate those 3 patches with Ableton's Analog Synth. And as a first step, I just copied the exact settings, so I was looking for the amount of decay, the amount of attack on the different envelopes and this stuff, and just copied them to analog and saw how it actually sounds, because it's really interesting to do this, because it shows you where the differences in those synthesizers lie, and that you can't just copy the settings because they are very unique in terms of their envelopes and filter sound. So yeah, it's a kind of a cool exercise to do. But then I also tried to tweak it a little further to actually come up with some sound that sounds good for itself, but also still resembles this kind of Minimoog patch. And by the way, my name is Yannis. If you're new here, I regularly post videos about music production and performance. And in case you'll enjoy this video, just be known that you can find way more videos on my channel about similar subjects that could be interesting for you. So here you can see the Ableton project, and I have 3 different sounds as mentioned, and they all have their unique color. And I'd like to start with some type of bass sound, because one classic Moog sound is this kind of 3 oscillator bass. And I first want to show you how it sounds like with the Arturia plugin. I'll also open it so you can have a look on those several settings. So yeah, very classic Moog type sound, and it's this kind of 3 oscillator bass with, yeah, you can see the filter is quite opened here, a little bit of resonance, then the filter envelope is also applied with like a third, then this filter envelope, and also the general envelope are very snappy and short. And also here, this basic envelope, like the amplitude envelope, doesn't have any decay, but a lot of sustain. So it's just the basic note, and then on top you have the kind of filter that brings in this motion that is so charismatic in the beginning. Now, when you try to apply this to analog, and here I called it copy, when I just copied the settings without any further tweaks influenced by my own taste. And the only thing that is a bit difficult to copy is that you don't have a third oscillator with a sawtooth wave or some square wave, because you have sub-oscillators, and I used one here because you can actually have 4 oscillators in total, because you have a sub-oscillator for both main oscillators. But I think the sub-oscillator is just some type of sine wave, so you don't exactly have the kind of sawtooth wave. But anyway, it gives you a third oscillator, so it's the closest we can get. And yeah, just played by analog, the whole thing sounds like this. And it's some quite significant difference. I mean, you feel like you know what it's supposed to be, but something's just wrong. And also the envelopes react totally differently. So sustain is sounding somehow higher here at this copy take, and the movement of the filter envelope is by far not as charismatic as it is with the Moog. And I'm also going to make some direct comparison. So this is again the Arturia one. I'm gonna switch to the copy one now. So yeah, especially the attack sounds really, really weird. And there's one additional thing that I realized, that the analog can't be as snappy as the MiniV from Arturia, because the minimum attack time is actually 5 milliseconds, whereas the Minimoog can go down to 0 point something, I think. Actually, it's 0.52. It's here on the snappiest setting. But still, this shouldn't be the biggest issue. Yeah, it just doesn't sound so snappy. And then I made some tweaks to it. So we can actually see here that the frequency I lowered a little, but I added a little bit of resonance. And I made the decay way longer in order to bring it out more, because somehow the envelope of the analog seems to be less snappy than the Moog one, so we have to make it longer in order to hear it more, because yeah, the way it's on this copy take is just very emotionless and lifeless. And let's just listen once to this tweaked version. still, it's not exactly like the original. There's just some filter sound to it that makes it sound more unique. That's just one of those main things that makes the synthesizer or synthesizers in general really charismatic, is the filter sound. And actually they, in my opinion, managed really well to get it for this plugin, because there's just a tone to it that I can't get anywhere near with the analog. I mean, if you hear the sound by itself, it sounds like this kind of Moog inspired sound, but if you compare it, there's also some smoothness that I wasn't able to get here. But at least it doesn't sound as deplaced as this copy one. I also reduced a little the loudness of oscillator 2, for example, here. So because the high oscillator was making it sound a little stiff. And I also added a little bit of the filter drive, which always makes it a little more charismatic. I also made the filter less intense, because at the copy thing, yeah, this goes to 18 by default, and so it was a third, so I had it on 6, but it didn't sound so good, so I reduced it a little. Sometimes I like to add the amount here, but sometimes you can easily go over the point where it just sounds too intense, so that's kind of what happened here. The amplitude settings are kind of similar, as you can see. I added at my take a little bit of a slow vibrato to make it sound a little more analog. Usually with bass sounds, this kind of 1 Hz tempo vibrato can be kind of cool, but it's not really obvious. And you see, I didn't add some key tracking yet, which might be activated at the Moog already, but I don't think it's too important for just getting this basic character, because the filter sound doesn't get generated through some keyboard tracking. Let's check another sound, and I picked some lead type sound that has a lot of filter resonance, because this is also something that can make a synth sound really charismatic, or just show you more of the charismatic side, because it's just a lot of modulation or resonance applied to the filter. So this is how it sounds like from the Arturia plugin. Yeah, I find like this type of sound very charismatic. Also, it has some inside harmony, because one of the oscillators is adding a fifth, as you can see here with the 7 semitones. And otherwise, it's again 3 oscillators and 1 low one, then 1 higher one, and in between there is this kind of fifth that also has some detune. I didn't mention the detune for the first example, but you probably saw it also on the detune setting of the analog synth. And also, yeah, that is also important that those oscillators are detuned. And here you can see that the filter frequency is kind of turned down, but a lot of resonance is applied, and also more of the filter intensity. And yeah, this time the attack of the filter is a little slower. The decay is quite long, and also a lot of sustain. And the amplitude envelope is kind of short in all regards, and the sustain is not fully there, but also like 2/3. And this is basically what there is. I mean, sometimes you have here those advanced settings with some modulations, and you see there's some LFO applied to one oscillator and also to everything. And yeah, I just, for making some type of similar thing, I will add some vibrato at the analog synth. Otherwise, it's not the most obvious thing here. And you can't do with analog those kind of LFO modulates, the VCF envelope decay thing. That's actually something that also is very cool about those Arturia plugins, because they give you an enormous amount of modulation possibilities. They just enhance the typical synthesizer, like they emulated the Moog, but then they just add all those features that you have by digital music production working with computers, which is actually super cool and a huge plus for just justifying getting this collection, in my opinion. Anyways, let's close this and see how it sounds like if you add those exact settings to the analog synth. So you see here 282 frequency, resonance was kind of 59%, and the same settings just for the filter envelope and the amplitude envelope. And here I have OSC1 being the higher oscillator this time, because then it has the sub oscillator, which is the lower oscillator, so they form the octave. And then the second oscillator is in between by turning it down 1 octave, it would also be at the same pitch as the sub oscillator, but then turned up by 7 semitones means that it's actually the 5th. And it sounds like this. It was kind of shocking because, yeah, this kind of frog type beginning is really awkward. And you can really see how different those envelopes just react. Let's make some direct comparison once more. So this is the copy analog one. And now the other one. So yeah, if we want to get closer, we have to change some things. And let's actually see what I did to my tweaked version. I mean, it again won't sound exactly the same. But you can see that I was opening the frequency here a lot and also changing the amount of the resonance a little. So, because that's the thing, the resonance and the filter are just very unique for any synthesizer. And you should rather go by ear if you try to create a sound than just copying settings. But you could see that here it didn't work. And also in regards to the envelopes, because I had to put the filter envelope to like the shortest attack, because this way it didn't create this kind of frog type beginning that I wasn't such a huge fan of. And let's compare those two. The decay I also made a little longer, but the sustain kind of stayed. And okay, this is asim one, but this doesn't have a big difference. Then I again reduced the amount of the filter because I felt like with analog it is kind of obvious earlier than with this Minimoog plugin, as you can see here. And let's also look at the amplitude envelope. So here I actually made the attack a little longer for the amplitude because I think I wanted to have it a bit smoother. And the decay is kind of similar, the sustain also, so not much changed here. But yeah, I just adjusted the filters a little and made this filter envelope short to avoid the frog character. And I also mixed a bit those sounds, so this 5th, for example, is a bit higher, and actually I did it the other way around. So this is the same octave as this one, but then 5 semitones down, which is the same, just in green, basically, that you can either have some higher oscillator 5 steps down or some lower oscillator 7 steps up. It's exactly the same tone. And let's see how this one sounds like. Again, the original one. And if you compare them directly, you still see that the Moog one sounds more charismatic, and maybe I'm just not good enough at getting close enough with the analog synth, but I also think it's the point of synthesizers to add character directly. It shouldn't be hidden after like five minutes of tweaking or even more. So you can see that, yeah, the Moog emulation has some type of more charismatic filter section or just sound in general. That also makes it just a bit smoother. I think the default settings of the analog always sound a bit harsher because you have to work a little more to make it smooth. But then again, I mean, this is a super usable sound and it's kind of cool. And it's only about this direct comparison that you realize, okay, this maybe sounds more charismatic, but still it could totally work inside some composition or production. So you can also get it to a sound that is really similar. So for the last sound, I picked some pad sound because I wanted to have something with some more interaction between different voices, some polyphonic type sounds. And let's just listen to it. So yeah, just some kind of cool classic sounding pad, and also some pad that actually uses some other waveforms. I mean, the upper one is a sawtooth, but it also uses the rectangular here and the square wave. Again, we have to make compromises because we don't have 3 fully flexible oscillators on analog, but we can kind of make it work. And so let's check again. The cutoff frequency is kind of mildly opened. A little bit of resonance as so often. This time it's just a little bit of the filter envelope applied, and also this one is interesting because it has a super long decay, some longish attack, and also some quite high sustain. And the amplitude envelope has kind of similar settings. I mean, the attack is a bit faster. The decay, I mean, it's also long, but this is like crazy long. And the sustain is also kind of a little more than the middle. And yeah, as you saw, we have some square waves here as well, but also one of them is just at a very low volume. A little bit of noise, but I think I didn't mix it in yet on the analog. I can actually quickly do this. And those are basically the most important things here. Again, the advanced section will have some possibly vibrato thing applied. Like here, the LFO to the VCO 123 FM, which is basically a vibrato. And this one, again, we can't apply one of the envelopes to the overall tuning or individual oscillators, so we just leave that out because it's also just with a tiny amount, so we shouldn't worry about this too much. And let's see how it sounds like if we copy this exactly to analog. And as I mentioned, one of them has to be the sub oscillator again. So I think here I have it on the oscillator 2. So one is the sawtooth wave, the other one is the square wave, and with this one I just added the sub oscillator, which on the Moog setting was the rectangular one. Actually no, this one was the rectangular one and the sub oscillator was the square wave. But anyway, we can't exactly copy this rectangular one here. We can play with the pulse width, but I think I already figured out that 50 is the closest I was able to get. And so yeah, let's just see how it kind of compares. Let's change back once. And again, you can see that it's kind of a mismatch in terms of how much of the filter is applied, because somehow you hear it way stronger with the MiniV patch than here. And nevertheless, in this case, I felt the analog sounds really cool if I exactly copy those settings. You see there's also some glide, but there's some weird thing that I don't hear it at all. I don't know if it's some bug, because there's this new Ableton version that is kind of running natively on the M1 MacBooks. I have this MacBook Air, but somehow this glide doesn't react. I don't know if it's a glitch or if maybe it doesn't react to the envelopes if they are programmed this way. But again, it's not super crucial, so let's just ignore it. And it's by itself just a very pleasant sound. And you almost think, or I almost think, that this MiniV pad sounds a little too harsh compared to this one, because this is just some very mellow pad. So it worked kind of nicely to copy those settings. Nevertheless, again, I tried to bring it a little more closer to this one. So there are not many tweaks. I think I just increased the intensity of the filters. So here's like 4.71 versus 3.63. It's actually not even that much. And tiny changes to the sustain. I was adding a little bit of detune, but actually I didn't do it at the copy one, so we could actually edit here as well, but it sounded cool. Let's just stay with it this way. And yeah, the filter is a little more open, but yeah, the changes are very tiny. I guess the amplitude would be exactly the same. Almost. The decay and sustain changed a tiny bit, but yeah, the only thing that actually changes now is that here it sounds also just a little brighter by applying more of the filter, also opening it a little more. Let's see. And again, the Moog one. And again, it has this filter sound that I'm not really able to get with analog, which is just a charismatic thing of the synth itself. And I always thought with all the V collection synths that especially the MiniV has a very particular tone to it. And that should be it for this video. I hope it was interesting. And yeah, as mentioned, it's not supposed to be some only sound design tutorial, but more some kind of also comparison, because to me it's always super interesting how, for example, this kind of third-party plugin like the MiniV compares to the stock plugin. And I'm always looking for kind of explanations to justify buying something like a third-party plugin. And I must say, you can always get to nice things with analog, but also here you see that the plugin actually has some charismatic tone to it. And if you're interested in more of those kind of comparisons, I also did it with my analog synthesizer some weeks ago, like the Vermona Performer. Comparing it to analog, you'll find the video here if you're interested. Also, you're warmly invited to just share your own thoughts on how you think those things compare, or if there were things that were particularly interesting to you. I'm always really keen on hearing your own thoughts on this. And also, one major point for me of having this kind of third-party synth collection is that it's also very educational, because I mean, all those synthesizers they emulate are just crazy expensive, and having this on your computer, being able to kind of understand how the routing was, how the kind of filter sound was, is just super, super cool and helped me already a lot in understanding how those synths evolved, worked, or what kind of types of synthesizers there are. So this is also something that is very valuable to me. But also, I mentioned that they have all those additional features where you can just add all sorts of modulations, and also many of those plugins have like very advanced sequencers, so they really offer a lot of value. So I think this is definitely some kind of purchase that I feel very good about, especially if you pick it during some Black Friday sale, as I was able to do some time ago. Anyways, if you're interested in more sound design tutorials with Ableton Live, I'm going to link some playlist here where you can find more videos. And apart from that, I just wish you inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and I hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye!